choice that I am making to feel more in control of my life.
That's Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She recently posted on social media about her choice to freeze her eggs. Very personal choice. She chose to make it very public, and that's good because we start talking about things like this. It brought the topic of reproductive health back into the spotlight, and so 9 News health expert Dr. Kohli is here to talk a little bit more about it with us. This has become even though it's very expensive, become much more common over the last decade or so, right?
Extremely common. I mean, if you look at the history of egg freezing, 1972 in England, they decided to really prove that concept with mice. 1986, we had our first live birth, but it wasn't until 2012 when they said this is no longer considered experimental. So it used to only be reserved for women who had cancer, who wanted to preserve fertility, premature menopause, they were getting their ovaries removed. Now, it's a trendy thing that everybody is doing as a way to sort of put off being a mother and really pause that biological clock, which so many women have to think about.
Yeah, and so many people find themselves at a point in their life where they just haven't met that person, and they're thinking, well, wait a minute. So this is not cheap. So walk us through the process.
It's not cheap and it's not easy. So if you go on some social media, Instagram influencers, you'll see them say, oh, in between client dinners, I got my eggs harvested.
Oh,
it's not like that.
I can't believe anything you hear from social media.
This is like as stressful as cancer treatment, really. So yeah, and it costs about $15,000 to $20,000 per cycle.
Yes.
And one woman could have to have multiple rounds.
How many cycles on average? Well,
it depends on your age. So the younger you are, the fewer cycles you need, because the more eggs you can harvest per cycle. But it also depends on how many eggs your ovaries release, how many of those end up being viable. And then not to mention the cost of storing those eggs. You have to pay a fee every year to store them until you end up using them or end up discarding them. So you start about 2 weeks before, 8 to 12 days before, you inject yourself full of hormones for those 8 to 12 days. Then you go have this procedure where they put a needle through the wall of the vagina to retrieve the eggs, and then they freeze them. That's considered a single cycle, of course, all done under sedation.
Yeah, and the shots themselves are no walk in the park.
Not to mention the side effects of those.
No, no.
Yeah.
So when you make a decision like this, which is very personal, and she chose to make it very public, some people are saying AOC is too old to freeze her eggs. She's 36.
That's a little old.
Is it?
Yes. So what the society really recommends for reproductive medicine is the sweet spot is your early 30s. So really 30 to 35. Now most physicians will do it up to 37 to 38, but really that evolutionarily we weren't designed to really have kids that late. Those are even considered geriatric pregnancies. So we know the quality of the eggs go down. We know the number of eggs that we need to retrieve in order to have a successful cycle goes down. And we also know that those eggs are less likely to turn into successful pregnancies the older that you get. So really, if you are a woman who's thinking about doing this, the time to start thinking about this is your early 30s. Talk to your doctor, talk to your family, really decide if this is a personal decision. And I think there's really two sides of the coin here. Of course, it helps us to delay the biology, but on the other side of it is the fact that are we being lulled into a false sense of security? Because we think we can have this later, and then it may not come to fruition. It's more dangerous for women to carry a pregnancy the older that they are, especially in their 40s. And so if that's what we're encouraging more women to do, then that's probably not a good idea. Of course, the cost and the medical side effects of the procedure. So I think it's a lot to weigh here. This is not a fad. This is not something everybody should do. This is something that's a really personal decision, depending on what your goals are, what you're hoping to achieve in life.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on all that, because it's a lot to think about, because these things do become something that everybody is talking about. I also don't know that that's healthy for people's mindset either, because I think a lot of women start panicking.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, Kim, because a lot of women are fed this false narrative that you have to have it all.
Yes.
Some women couldn't, won't be mothers, and that's okay, right? And so this idea that everything has to happen through this specific process, I think it creates an impossible standard for women. And I want women to understand that when they freeze their eggs, the risk of birth defects is 25 to 50% higher. Now, that's not just with egg freezing, that's with IVF too. So any kind of assisted reproductive technology compared to natural conception does carry a relatively higher risk of birth defects. Now, the overall risk is still pretty small, and it really depends on what age you do it at. But that's a consideration
So
as
like
well.
most huge life decisions, it's different for everybody. You really
Yeah.
have to look at your own situation.
Don't follow those influencers.
No.
Talk to your doctor.
Yeah, and
do your
it's
research.
expensive too. That's something to take into consideration. All right, Dr. Kohli, thanks so much.